cross-section of a huge object about 100 feet below the surface in central Alaska.
You know that feeling when someone tells you not to look at something, and suddenly it is the only thing you can think about?
It was a pyramid, a huge pyramid, bigger than the Great Pyramid of Giza, 550 feet tall from the top to the base. The news showed the pyramid's location on a map.
Now picture that feeling backed by military intelligence credentials, classified archives, and men in dark suits showing up to confiscate evidence. 40 people saw the same thing on the same night, and by sunrise, not a single trace of it remained. One person decided that silence was not good enough. He walked into the wilderness to find the truth himself. He never walked out. His last 3 words will haunt you. The blank spot on the map. Let's take you back to September 1989. A guy named Doug Mutler was stepping off a plane in Anchorage, Alaska for the first time. Doug was not your average new arrival. He was a chief warrant officer too, a counterintelligence specialist with the United States Army. His entire job was to investigate espionage and terrorism. This was a man who was literally trained to notice things that other people miss. And that training was about to ruin his peace of mind for the next 20 years. Doug grew up in Ohio, so Alaska might as well have been another planet. The state covers almost 700,000 square miles. That is nearly twice the size of Texas. His first assignment was simple: learn the terrain. So he did what any good intelligence officer would do. He walked into the map room at Fort Richardson, spread out several military maps across a giant table, and started studying. Mountain ranges, rivers, lakes, mining towns, cities, standard stuff. Everything looked exactly the way it should. And then he saw something that did not belong. On a detailed map of Denali National Park, roughly 60 miles southwest of Mount McKinley, there was a tiny patch of white space. It was no bigger than his thumb. Doug grabbed a magnifying glass and leaned in close. Stamped across that blank space were 5 words that made absolutely no sense. This area not surveyed to date. Now, let us explain why those 5 words should have been impossible. This was the Cold War. Alaska sits right across the Bering Strait from the Soviet Union. The United States military had surveyed every single inch of this state, every ridge, every frozen creek bed, every valley. The idea that some random patch of wilderness just got skipped was not just unlikely, it was laughable, and Doug knew it. Blank spots on military maps do not happen because someone forgot. They happen because someone decided that spot should be blank. But Doug was a disciplined soldier. He told himself that if something classified was hiding in that zone, he would find out through proper channels when the time was right. So he filed the question in the back of his mind and moved on with his duties. 3 full years would pass before he got his answer. And when it finally came, it did not arrive through a classified briefing or a secure channel. It came through a television set, in a room full of off-duty soldiers, connected to something that happened on the complete opposite side of the planet. The shockwave that cracked open a secret. On May 21, 1992, China detonated a massive underground nuclear weapon at its Lop Nur testing facility in the Xinjiang desert. We are talking about a blast somewhere between 660 kilotons and a full megaton. To put that in perspective, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima was about 15 kilotons. This was at least 40 times more powerful. The explosion sent shockwaves ripping through the entire planet's crust, traveling thousands of miles in every direction. Seismologists around the world went into overdrive, analyzing what those waves revealed about the inside of the Earth. Now here is where the story makes its first strange turn. 2 scientists from the United States Geological Survey named Vidali and Benz actually published a paper in the journal Nature about what those seismic waves uncovered. Researchers at the University of Alaska Fairbanks Geophysical Institute found a massive anomaly, roughly 2,700 kilometers beneath northern Alaska. It was approximately 300 kilometers across and 130 kilometers thick. This was peer-reviewed, published science. real data from a real nuclear test. But what happened next never made it into any journal. Fast forward to late 1992, somewhere around November or December. Doug Mutler is hanging out with about 39 or 40 off-duty soldiers at Fort Richardson. Someone in the room suddenly hushes everybody and cranks up the volume on the television. The local Anchorage News on Channel 13 is running a story about that Chinese underground nuclear test and what the seismic data accidentally revealed. And this is the part where everything changes. According to the broadcast, the shockwaves had bounced off something enormous buried beneath the surface of central Alaska. The news described it as a pyramid-shaped structure, not a small one either, roughly 550 feet from base to apex. That would make it bigger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Doug watched the screen as the report showed the pyramid's approximate location on a map, and his stomach dropped straight to the floor. Because the location they were showing appeared to be right in the center of that tiny blank zone he had found on the military map 3 years earlier. The zone labeled this area not surveyed to date. He sprinted to the map room to compare. The coordinates matched. Doug raced back to his quarters and programmed his VCR to record the 11 o'clock rebroadcast. He needed that footage. He needed proof. But the late-night news came and went without a single word about any pyramid. The story had been completely pulled from the broadcast. Doug called everyone he knew who followed the news. Nobody had heard a thing. Think about that for a second. A room full of trained military personnel all saw the same broadcast, and by morning, the entire thing had been erased. The men who made it disappear. The very next morning, Doug Mutler marched into that television station with his military intelligence credentials in hand. He walked up to the station manager and asked him directly about the pyramid story. The manager's response was immediate and completely flat. He said there was no such story, and he had absolutely no idea what Doug was talking about. Put yourself in Doug's shoes for a moment. You know what you saw. 40 other soldiers know what they saw. And now the man running the station that aired the story is standing in front of you, saying it never happened. That kind of denial does not just confuse you. It tells you something very important. It tells you the denial itself is part of the story. Doug was about to leave when a young station employee, probably a technician or junior staffer, nervously waved him into a quiet corner. This kid was visibly shaking. He kept looking over his shoulder to make sure nobody was watching. Then, he lowered his voice and told Doug the truth. The story was real. The station aired it during the 6 o'clock broadcast. But within hours, 2 men in dark suits showed up. The employee described them as scary guys who went straight into the station manager's office and grilled him behind closed doors. By the time they left, every single tape, every recording, and every copy of that segment had been taken. The young employee begged Doug to leave his name out of it. Doug agreed. He knew these tactics intimately. As a counterintelligence officer, he had seen this exact playbook before. This was standard protocol for burying classified information. A year later, Doug was transferred to Fort Meade in Maryland. For those who do not know, Fort Meade is the headquarters of the National Security Agency, and it also houses a massive warehouse of classified government files. Rows and rows of shelves, floor after floor, filled with archives of government activity. Much of it top secret. Doug played it smart. He showed the archivist his credentials and casually asked about files related to archaeological sites in Alaska. He never once used the word pyramid. The archivist did not even flinch. He scribbled a floor number, a row, and a shelf on a slip of paper and handed it over. Doug found the Alaska files. He pulled a few folders and sat down in a reading room. But before he could crack open a single page, 2 men appeared behind him. They told him he did not have a need to know for that information. Doug said he was just researching archaeological sites. They cut him off. "We know exactly what you are looking for," they said. "You need to leave this building immediately." And then one of them said something they should not have said. Doug remembered the exact words for the rest of his life. They said they do not want us messing with them up there anymore. He kept quiet for nearly 20 years until July 26, 2012. When he finally told his story publicly through investigative journalist Linda Moulton Howe on Coast to Coast AM, 700 feet below the ice. Once Doug's story hit the airwaves, something incredible happened. Other witnesses started coming forward. People who had kept their mouths shut for decades suddenly felt safe enough to talk. And the very first account to arrive, just one day after Doug's broadcast on July 27, 2012, was the most detailed one of all. It came from the adopted son of a man named Marty Johnson. And Marty's story did not start with a pyramid. It started with a bus ride that changed everything he believed about the world. Marty Johnson was a Navy veteran from World War II and a gifted electrical engineer. After the war, he was recruited by Western Electric Manufacturing, which was really Bell Labs, the legendary research division created from the engineering department of Western Electric and half owned by AT&T. Now here is a detail that most people completely overlook when they tell this story, and it matters a lot. Western Electric was the general contractor for the entire Distant Early Warning Line, also known as the DEW line. This was a chain of 63 radar stations stretching 3,000 miles across the Arctic from Alaska to Greenland. It was built between 1954 and 1957 using 25,000 workers over 33 months at a cost of over $750 million. Bell Labs designed the radar systems. In 1959, Marty was flown from Omaha, Nebraska to Unalakleet, Alaska. And here is another detail people miss. Unalakleet was a real documented DEW line support station that operated from 1958 to 1969. This was not some made-up location. You can look it up. When the door finally opened, the cold hit them like a punch to the face. Marty stepped out into a blinding white landscape. Nothing but ice, snow, and mountains in every direction. Then he spotted two uniformed men standing next to what looked like a small concrete shed sitting in the middle of absolutely nowhere. The group shuffled inside. An officer told them to grab the rail and hold on tight. He yanked a metal gate across the doorway and pushed a button. The floor jerked and started dropping. That little shed was just a surface entrance to an elevator shaft that went straight down into the earth. The elevator kept descending for a very long time. When it finally stopped, Marty stepped into a hallway that looked like every military building he had ever been inside. Gray concrete floors. Walls painted that same dull green beige. Deep inside the facility, something began grinding metal against metal, and that massive door slowly swung open. They walked through into a giant underground cavern. And there it was. The officer turned around and said 5 words that Marty would never forget. "Gentlemen, welcome to the Dark Pyramid." According to Marty's son, the pyramid stood 550 feet tall, with its base sitting 700 feet below the surface. The walls were angled at 48 degrees, not the usual 45, and Marty always insisted that this detail was critically important. Control rooms were built into each corner of the structure to measure the energy flowing through it. The whole purpose of the project was energy distribution. This thing was a power generator, and it was producing energy on a scale that defied everything Marty understood about physics. After he retired, Marty built a small aluminum replica of the pyramid at home. 2 months after Doug's story went public, in September 2012, another witness came forward. His name was Bruce Pearson, and he was sharing a story that his father Lee had carried in silence for over 30 years. 5 miles out, everything goes dark. Lee Pearson was a World War II Navy veteran who had fought on PT boats during the war. After retiring from military life, he eventually settled in Alaska in the mid-1970s. In the spring of 1978, Lee was hanging around the Unalakleet airport, swapping old war stories with a helicopter pilot friend who was still in active service. The pilot could tell Lee missed the action, so he threw out a casual offer. He had a quick supply run to make out near Denali, deep inside what people call the Alaska Triangle, 4 hours total there and back. Lee jumped at the chance. They flew due east for almost 2 hours. Then the pilot turned to Lee with a completely calm expression and said something that would have made most people want to turn around. He told Lee they were about 5 miles out and things were about to get very strange. He said the instruments would go haywire, alarms would start screaming, and Lee should not panic because they would switch to visual flight rules. That meant turning off the autopilot, keeping the ground in sight, and flying by nothing but their own eyes. Seconds later, the helicopter started going crazy. The radar screen went black. The compass needle spun like a fan blade. Every alarm in the cockpit fired at once, and then came total silence. Every instrument, every light, every single piece of electronic equipment in the helicopter went completely dead. But here is the thing that really makes your skin crawl. The engine kept running. They landed at a small compound, and a ground crew immediately started refueling with the engine still running and the rotor still spinning. Lee looked around and saw guardhouses with watchtowers, Quonset huts, razor wire everywhere, and a C-130 transport plane circling overhead in tight loops. 6 men in solid black uniforms rushed the helicopter and started pulling cargo. Lee, being a military man, instantly noticed that those uniforms had zero identification. The whole stop lasted maybe 4 minutes. Then they were airborne, heading west. The instant they reached about 5 miles from the site, every single instrument in the helicopter flickered back to life. Everything worked perfectly. Lee demanded to know what had just happened, but the pilot tapped his headset and pressed a finger to his lips. Somebody was monitoring the radio. Later, at a back table in a small bar near the airport, the pilot finally opened up. He told Lee that place was more secret than the Manhattan Project. Nobody was supposed to even know it existed. Deep underground, he said, there was a giant pyramid made of dark stone. It was believed to be thousands of years old, and engineers had been working on it since the 1950s. It was a power generator of some kind, and the amount of energy it put out was staggering. Lee asked how much power it generated. The pilot looked at him and said, "Enough to power the whole North Slope, all of Alaska, and probably the entire country of Canada." A retired naval captain stationed in Alaska later backed up part of this story. He said aircraft communications always malfunctioned when flying over a specific corridor east of Unalakleet and west of Mount Denali. Radar consistently showed massive electromagnetic energy radiating from the area. When he reported it to his commanding officer, he was told to shut up or face court-martial. Now the story crosses a line that will test exactly how open-minded you are willing to be. Because the United States government did not just hide what was happening in Alaska, they sent psychic spies to investigate it. The aliens inside the mountain. From 1972 to 1995, the CIA operated a classified program called Project Stargate. It cost American taxpayers roughly $20 million over its lifetime. The program's primary tool was something called remote viewing, which is the claimed ability to project your consciousness to any location on Earth and observe what is happening there without physically being present. Sounds insane, right? Except that the CIA funded it for 23 years. They do not spend 23 years and $20 million on things they think are completely useless. One of the most gifted remote viewers in the program was a man named Patrick Harold Price. And Price was not some guy they pulled off the street. He was the former vice mayor of Burbank, California. He worked security at Lockheed. In 1973, he joined Stanford Research Institute's classified program, and his results were so accurate that they rattled even the biggest skeptics in the intelligence community. In 1974, Price successfully remote viewed the Soviet nuclear facility at Semipalatinsk, describing details that were later confirmed by satellite imagery. The man had a verified track record. In 1973, Price produced an unsolicited 47-page document on his own initiative describing 4 underground bases around the world that he claimed were operated by beings that were not human. One of those locations was Mount Hayes, Alaska, sitting right in the heart of the Alaska Triangle at coordinates 63 degrees 39 minutes north latitude. Price described a launch cavity carved into volcanic rock, wave pattern matching equipment, a box-shaped antenna array, and beings that looked almost human but had different eyes and completely different internal biology. He said they could influence human thought through some form of direct transfer technology. On July 14, 1975, Pat Price died suddenly at the Stardust Hotel in Las Vegas right after a meeting with officials from the Office of Naval Intelligence and the NSA. Witnesses say a stranger bumped into him in the lobby. Price felt a sharp pain in his leg, and within hours he was suffering convulsions and cardiac arrest. He was dead before morning. The FBI later discovered that Price had been secretly briefing a senior Scientology official about classified details of the CIA program. But here is what really keeps people up at night. Price was not the only person who claimed to see something beneath Alaska. A woman later contacted Linda Moulton Howe, saying she had independently remote-viewed the Dark Pyramid. Her descriptions matched the physical accounts from Marty Johnson and Lee Pearson with disturbing accuracy. She described the surface building, the elevator descent, the underground military facility, and the massive black pyramid surrounded by equipment and personnel. But the detail that stood out most was the being leading a tour group through the facility. It looked human-shaped, but it was not human. It matched the same type of entity Pat Price had described inside Mount Hayes years earlier. Something is going on up there. Whether it connects to pyramids and aliens, or simply to the most brutal wilderness on the North American continent, something is swallowing people whole. The search for proof. When Doug Mutler finally went public in 2012, he chose his platform wisely. He reached out to Linda Moulton Howe, a journalist with a master's from Stanford University, 3 regional Emmy Awards, and a contribution to a Peabody Award-winning documentary. She was not some hobbyist with a blog. She verified Doug's DD-214, which is the official military document that records every detail of a service member's entire career. But here is where we need to be straight with you, because pretending the problems in this story do not exist would be dishonest, and you deserve better than that. The Chinese nuclear test happened on May 21, 1992. Doug says he watched the broadcast in late November or December 1992. That is a gap of 5 to 6 months, and there was no second Chinese nuclear test during that window. In 2014, a skeptic named Jason Colavito proposed a fascinating alternative explanation. On October 12, 1992, a magnitude 5.3 earthquake rocked Cairo, Egypt. It was the strongest quake ever recorded in that region. Over 500 people died in that earthquake, and the entire world panicked about whether the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids had been damaged. That story dominated international news for weeks. Colavito suggested something that sounds uncomfortable but makes a lot of sense. Doug was sitting in a noisy room with 40 other soldiers, probably only half paying attention to the television. It is entirely possible that his brain merged earthquake shaking the pyramids in Egypt with strange seismic readings from Alaska into one single blended memory of a pyramid discovered beneath Alaska. Then there is the hard science problem that nobody in the conspiracy community ever wants to address. Seismologists have explained clearly that teleseismic waves traveling over 10,000 kilometers from a nuclear test simply do not have the ability to resolve a building-sized object buried a few hundred feet underground. The wavelengths involved stretch hundreds of meters to full kilometers in length. Trying to use those waves to image a 550-foot pyramid would be like trying to photograph a single coin sitting on a table by using a radio tower from across the city. The technology does not work that way. The actual anomaly that scientists at the University of Alaska Fairbanks detected was located 2,700 kilometers below the surface, not 100 feet. It was a geological feature deep inside the Earth's mantle, roughly 300 kilometers across and 130 kilometers thick. And the problems do not stop there. Not a single one of those 40 soldiers from the barracks room has ever come forward to confirm Doug's account. No LexisNexis search has ever turned up a record of the Anchorage broadcast. Marty Johnson and Lee Pearson's stories exist only through their sons, and both sons remain completely anonymous to this day. The remote viewers offer zero physical evidence, and here is the detail that should genuinely make you pause. Linda Moulton Howe, for all her impressive credentials, was herself a confirmed target of deliberate government disinformation during the 1980s. A man named Richard Doty, a former agent of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, has publicly admitted that he spent years feeding completely fabricated stories about underground alien bases and fake government alien agreements to journalists and UFO researchers. He specifically targeted Linda with forged documents about something called Project Aquarius and the MJ-12 Committee. His disinformation campaign against another target, a physicist named Paul Benowitz, was so ruthlessly effective that it caused a total mental breakdown requiring hospitalization. Doty confessed to all of this publicly at UFO MegaCon in 2019, and the entire operation was laid bare in the 2013 documentary film Mirage Men. But then there is Bruce Pearson. And Bruce is the reason this story refuses to die. Lee Pearson's son took every detail his father ever shared, hired a pilot, and flew straight into the corridor between Unalakleet and Denali. And he actually found something. He found a squared-off patch of land with right angles and straight lines that simply do not occur in nature. He found the remains of an old road that appears on no official map anywhere. He found an abandoned airstrip that is completely absent from every government record in existence. The nearest marked road sits almost 100 miles away. His coordinates, roughly 63 degrees 17 minutes north and 152 degrees 31 minutes west, landed remarkably close to coordinates that a completely separate retired Navy officer had independently sent to Linda Moulton Howe without any connection to Bruce. She hired aerial photographer Frank Flavin to fly over the location on September 26, 2012. His photographs revealed a ragged circular clearing and what appeared to be signs of past human activity. It was not proof of a pyramid, but it was proof that somebody had been doing something at that extremely remote location. And whatever it was never recorded or documented by anyone. But the part of this story that genuinely keeps me awake at night is what happened to Nathan Campbell. On May 27, 2020, Nathan Isiak Campbell, a 40-year-old man from Wasilla, Alaska, hired charter pilot Jason Sturgis to fly him out to Kari Lake in Denali National Park. The lake sits just a few miles from the pyramid's alleged coordinates. Nathan told the pilot straight up that he was going on an Indiana Jones adventure to find the lost pyramid of Alaska. He packed solid gear and a satellite communicator and arranged a pickup date of September 15th, 4 full months later. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. His GPS signal showed normal movement around the area. Then, by mid-June, his last position pinged roughly 5 miles from Kari Lake. After that, complete silence. When the National Park Service finally sent a search team to his campsite in September, they found everything still there. The tent had collapsed under weather. Rodents had chewed through his diary. His supplies were untouched, but Nathan himself was gone. The last entry he ever wrote in that diary was just 3 words: "Went to get water." Nathan Campbell has never been found. He remains listed as case number MP74840 in the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. Journalist Craig Medred, who covered Nathan's disappearance in detail, made an observation that is hard to argue with. There are no government projects of any kind within 50 miles of Kari Lake. Alaska is larger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. The vast majority of it is completely roadless wilderness where a person can disappear in seconds. Glaciers conceal crevasses deep enough to swallow someone without a trace. Rivers surge without any warning. Magnetic declination across Alaska reaches up to 30 degrees, which makes standard compasses dangerously unreliable. Every single year, people walk into this landscape and simply never come back. You do not need a hidden pyramid to explain any of that. So, what do you think is really hiding beneath that Alaskan ice? Tell us your theory in the comments, because this mystery is far from solved. And I want to know which possibility scares you the most.